Okay, my top tip then for Key Stage 3, I particularly use this with a Year 8 group, is I always make them a little challenge for as they come into the door. Usually they're quite a busy, rowdy class, but it gets most of them working straight away with a little challenge, and they like the competitive element. So these are some that I've made before. Alright, really, really good if you want them to be looking at a picture. Usually I find that much more easy if it's in front of them instead of on the board. And the best one that I ever did was a spot the difference, which might not look really challenging, but they all really enjoyed it, and it helps settle the class before we start the lesson.
Right, so sometimes as a plenary I'll use a game such as bingo or a quiz and have prizes at the end. But often that makes them a bit too excited, so what I do is I write up on the board 3 strikes before I cancel the quiz or bingo, and every time it gets a bit too raucous, I just put a cross. 3 crosses, that means I'm happy to call off the prizes, and they're usually very responsive to that.
Right, my top tip for Key Stage 3 is routines. So always make sure I've got a starter on a sheet of paper when they come, and they can just get on with the starter. Stickers, they love those little shiny circular stickers. So if someone's doing some good work or doing the right thing, I'll go around and put a sticker on their book or on their blazer. And finally, learning to ignore the students who consistently say call out. So I rather than dealing with them, I just ignore them, and in the end they tend to realise that actually calling out isn't what I'm going to pay attention to, and I pay attention to the ones that have their hand up. And that's my top tips for the day.
A top tip for Key Stage 3 is to have a very clear and transparent reward and sanction system. I think the use of visual aids is very useful, and might put them around the board, classroom so it's clear for the students to see, and just be consistent and be fair.
Okay, my top tips for Key Stage 3 would be, I always greet them at the door, I always give them a starter activity. If they're doing anything, I normally put music on, some classical stuff, just to chill them out, and so they know that their noise level can't go above the music, so I always have to hear it all the time. Very short tasks, and often I say to them, would you rather task, so they get to pick. And generally if they have ownership and they've selected the task, they're more willing to be focused in doing it. And also I'm just really nasty to them, and I shout at them quite a lot, but that's it.
What I do for my Key Stage 3 students is I normally introduce 3 lives for behaviour. On some days where I think they need it, I'll mention it's only going to be 2 lives. And what I'll do is I'll say, once you've lost all your lives, there's going to be a phone call home. Now, that's subject to them redeeming those lives back again. So if they do something good, they get that life back. It has various success. I wouldn't say it works all the time, but yeah, that's the strategy that I use.
I have tried getting the class to devise their own 4 golden rules. Every time I see somebody in that lesson following one of those rules, they get a tally mark, and tally marks equate to raffle tickets for the end of the half term, and then we draw lots for prizes at the end of the half term. So the more tally marks you have, the more raffle tickets you have, the more likely you win a prize.
Right, whilst doing group work with the students, we find it's really important in the LSC to ensure that there's a routine kept for the students, that there's continuity, that we're all saying the same thing, sticking to the same rules, and it's really important to reinforce manners with the younger students. If you do that from Year 7, then they'll remember them all the way through to school, hopefully. Thank you.
Okay, so when I really want to get a Key Stage 3 class quiet, rather than risking my voice or anything, I tend to clap my hands or little clicks and, I don't know, just dance around and play a bit, and but keep it sort of auditory and visual clues like this, and yeah, I tend to find that works and helps me.
Yeah, it's important that students behave themselves in lessons. I think that the best way to ensure that is really to ensure that they understand that if they're respectful, if they're polite, that will be returned, and that gets them a long way in life. Okay?
I try and say something positive to them when they come in the door about anything, equipment, uniform, shoes, whatever, just something positive, so the first interaction is something nice.
Right, when a class has got a day book, I think it's sometimes useful to get the big characters in the class, like the alpha male or the alpha female of the group, to report back. So at the end of the day, they'll report back and say, yeah, this is how well we did as a class, so they understand about collective learning and all that lovely stuff.
Hey, Key Stage 3 strategy.
make sure you have high expectations, make sure you keep to the expectations, make sure that students know the expectations, and it's always a good idea to develop a look.
Okay, so my new strategy that I'm trying, particularly with year 7 and 8, is 3 before me, which is the 3 things you should do before you ask the teacher. 1, look around the room, look on any handout you've been given, any worksheet that they've been given, any instructions on the board, starter, and around the room for what they should be doing, or when they've been given a task, what the instructions for the task are. 2, they should think about whether or not they understand the instructions, whether they've listened properly and understood, can they use past experience to do it, do they already really know what they should be doing but they just have to think about it a bit harder. And 3, ask another student quietly if they can help them, and only then, if they still don't know what they're meant to be doing or they still don't understand the task, then they're allowed to ask the teacher.
My strategies for Key Stage 3 are getting them more involved in the lesson, so getting one pupil to read out the answers to the class, or getting someone up to the board to do some problem solving, or actually I do a lot of maths bingo, so that would be on a topic they've learnt before or during that lesson, and just to get them to answer questions on that, and they'll have a grid, and it's like a competition, so the first one to get all 9 right will get 10 house points, or the second one get 5. So those are my tips.
Okay, so sometimes with Key Stage 3, I limit them to 3 questions per lesson. So they're allowed to ask people in the class as many questions as they like, but they're only allowed to ask me 3. So it makes them really think, do I need to ask this question?
Hello, my strategy for behaviour management I actually stole from working in primary school with year 6s, and it works really well, especially Key Stage 3. It's when I put my hand in the air, I tell them I'm going to count down, and if they're not silent by 0, then there'll be problems. So yeah, I've been working with it, I've been doing it with Key Stage 3, and it works a treat also with Key Stage 4.
In my Key Stage 3 lessons in history and RE, I will design the PowerPoint so there's always clear road signs for the learners. So they will always expect to come into the sort of engaging image on the front slide, which will be accompanied by the yellows, and then the starter, which they get on straight away. We then usually have a bit of information, and then quite often we will have like a bubble, which is basically just a mind map. But as soon as I say get the bubble down, the kids know exactly what they're doing. They know that they're going to have to get at least 3 of their own points down, and then they're going to have to share with their partners, and then we're going to be feeding back. So it's things like that I've got sort of almost training them into that process, where as soon as they see it on the board, they know exactly what they're doing.
A top tip for succeeding lessons is for pupils not to stress about their work. An example is a year 7 class, little kid. Their homework was to make a drainage basin model, and yet a kid, Corey, came up to me and was stressed at me and said, "Oh, how can I make a drainage basin model? You know, when I don't even know what one is." And I just said, "Well, that's what today is all about. You know, I need to get to the learning objectives first, and then I'll teach you. So do not worry." So I think definitely keep calm and carry on is a really good approach to a great lesson.
I suppose it's a real pity that I don't teach a lot of Key Stage 3, and maybe I should. One thing which I always do with all students, but I think works particularly well with younger students, after they've got over the silliness of it, is, as you can hear, a little gentle background music. I always find some choral 16th century music is very effective, and it kind of calms them right down. And also, 2 quick things is I do believe that the routines are all important, the lining up, the standing behind the desk, and maybe we should have those for years 8 and 9 as well. And the final thing, of course, is that if you ask a year 6 teacher what they do to get attention, is that they put their hand up and they don't say anything, and they wait for all the children to put their hands up. And actually maybe that's something we should think about here.